No Small Matter is the first feature documentary to explore early childhood education in America today. The film was written and co-directed by Greg Jacobs, who has over 200 documentaries to his credit. Mr. Jacobs is also the author of Getting Around Brown: Desegregation, Development, and the Columbus Public Schools. Mr. Jacobs is a graduate of Yale University and holds a master's degree in history from Ohio State. He was kind enough to sit down and chat with us about the making of No Small Matter. Thank you, Greg Jacobs, for joining us today to discuss your film, No Small Matter. You've done a lot of documentary films. Tell us about your joining on to this project.
I got involved in it in the first place because we had been asked to do a video for an organization called the Ounce of Prevention Fund, which is a big advocacy group here in Chicago. And they sent us down to their EduCare facility on the South Side, which is this amazing early learning facility for low-income families on the South Side of Chicago. And after a week, I was like, oh my God, why hasn't anybody told me about this? This is about as close to the answer as you can get. I had written a book about school desegregation in my hometown, which is Columbus, Ohio, and I had kind of given up on K through 12 because it seems so entrenched. And the things that we really need to do to fix it, we're never going to do. Because it's all about the intersection of race, place, and poverty. And suddenly there was like, I was imagining it almost as like, if K through 12 is a room on fire and everyone's running around and screaming, early education was this 1 foot of clear air at the bottom where you could actually do something. And if you did something there, it would affect everything that comes after it. And so that made me a convert right away. And my co-directors, John Siskel and Danny Alpert, had their own journeys to conversion. And by the time we started the project, we were all, zealous that everybody needs to know about this. The teachers are us. And that was I think a huge takeaway that I think really informs the whole film, that it's the magic ingredient in all of this is relationships. That we forget that we are always the ones, when you think about the enormity, the conceptual enormity of what babies are learning, that you forget about because we don't remember being babies, all of that is happening at that point, but all of that is being delivered to them by the giant people all around them who seem to be somehow connected to them. And so, we tell people it's not about giving people flashcards or cramming information into babies' heads. It's just about supportive, loving relationships. Somebody described it as the fluoride in the toothpaste.
We media educators all agree that education is the most important aspect for living a successful life. Why this film at this time? Has pre-K education in America been largely just ignored?
The way I like to describe it is that 0 to 5, we always talk about the movie as if there's any wisdom to the phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. The movie's about what happens when the village disappears and nothing takes its place. And so this is really about the fact that over the last 50 years or so, we have essentially either privatized 0 to 5 or abdicated our kind of communal responsibility to families with babies and young children altogether. And it's a slow burn, a slow-moving crisis, basically, but you start to see the effects of it inevitably in every aspect of our lives. And because there's no system of 0 to 5 in America, there are different elements. There's childcare and pre-K and home visiting and all that stuff, but there's no single system like there's a public school system. It makes it harder to deal with, harder to conceptualize, but also more hopeful because we can actually do something and maybe get it right. If we get it right, it makes everything better. It makes everything better, not just in 10 or 20 or 50 years, but it makes everything better tomorrow.
We've all been subjected to, let's just say, less than successful documentary films, and your film opens with a wonderful, it has a great sense of humor, spoofing some of those less successful documentary films. It's great that you have incorporated a sense of humor into the film. Was that the initial thought from the outset?
It was. I mean, I think part of it for us is that in a way, we knew we were making the kind of movie that we wouldn't necessarily want to watch ourselves, because when a movie has a moral point of view that's kind of, where it's going, there are not going to be any surprises, and it starts to feel claustrophobic. And why bother? I can read the description and I got it. And so one of the things that we wanted to acknowledge was, okay, there may be some of you in this audience who are watching this movie and dreading it. Just absolutely like, oh my God, are you kidding me? I have to sit for who knows how long to watch a movie about early childhood education. And so we wanted to kind of cop to that, to say, this is not going to be the movie you think it's going to be, for one thing, and also just to acknowledge and surprise you with that we're going to be, we have a sense of humor, we're aware that you think you know where this is going, and that was really fun. It was also a great metaphor because if the whole message of the movie is beginnings matter, let's make the beginning of the movie set a tone that matters.
You also make the wonderful decision to incorporate Alfre Woodard into the film. She's a producer and she's also the narrator of the film. How did she get involved in the project?
We part of it was, you start, of course, in a kind of more of a traditional verite sensibility where, can we do this without any narration? And then it quickly becomes apparent for this particular topic, you could do a verite film, you could do infinite verite films about this, the elements of this topic, but you can't really do a verite film that makes the argument that we're making, the encompassing argument that we're making. So there had to be a narrator. And, I think we definitely wanted it to, there are all kinds of pros and cons for different types of voices, a male voice, a female voice, are there distinctively, is there distinctively an African-American voice or not? And I think we just thought she has such a wonderful voice and she is such an extraordinary actress, that she would provide both a sense of comfort for people and passion, but also I think almost invisibly an awareness that this is a movie that is also about the deepest challenges we face in society, which are, always have to do with race. So even though the movie is never explicitly in any way about race, I think that suffuses it because, in a sense, it's this is an issue that can really, really, really be beneficial, particularly for low-income communities of color.
And you've chosen to follow some families of race and various backgrounds, and the children involved in those families. How did you go about selecting the children that you follow in the film? And did you shoot 20 of them and edit it into 4, or just choose them from the beginning?
The whole process was I always describe documentaries as like a puzzle where you don't have the picture on the box and you don't even know if you have the right pieces. So there were, it was always picking pieces, and we knew that there were certain things we had to have. One was it had to be representative of the country geographically, because if it felt like it was coming all from blue states, for example, if this was a coastal film, you would feel it. We also wanted the families to be not extreme in their, a lot of times documentaries kind of need the overcoming of the extreme to make them work. And in a sense, we were deliberately, I remember saying to somebody, we were intentionally shooting every toe off of our foot narratively in order to make the argument we want to make. So we wanted them not to be that extreme, to be sort of recognizable to kind of the mass middle of the audience, as I see myself in that. And then we wanted them also to be kind of, in terms of the representation, to sort of jumble up your expectations a little bit. So we wanted to make sure that the representation itself, ethnically, racially, et cetera, didn't allow you necessarily as an audience member to immediately leap to preconceived notions that we have as a society. So that was a complicated puzzle, and we were reaching out to people all over the country and kind of eventually settling on these folks. And then you sort of you commit and then you make it work.
I love the analogy of the jigsaw puzzle there. The for a lot of families who can't afford pre-K education, their education is putting the kids down in front of a television set. Hopefully, they're tuned to PBS and not someplace else. What do you think is the role of television in pre-K and media?
Well, I would actually, step back and add that it's not just families that can't afford early child education. It's all families now. In fact, in a lot of ways, it's families who can absolutely afford it, but you've got two working parents who are so busy and they get to the end of the day and they're just like, okay, I can't do this right now. And I think that's especially happening now during the pandemic. Families are becoming extremely aware of the importance of this, and the screen is becoming even more of a siren and a devil for people. I think this is not something we focused on because we knew there are other films and other places that work on this, but I think my sense is that screens are a necessary part of their in everybody's life. You can't deny it. We didn't want to kind of keep them out of the film entirely because we know that's just the reality of people's lives. When done with context and with participation from the families and not solely as a babysitter or a replacement for human interaction, they can be neutral or beneficial, I think. When it's 6 hours in front of, it turns out to be a Law and Order marathon for a 3-year-old, that's a dangerous thing. But they've done some really fascinating experiments with screens. The iLabs, the people in the film in Washington who are studying in incredible detail the brains of babies as they interact, have done some studies where they've shown that if you have a lesson over a screen for an infant, it won't register. But if you have a lesson with the person in the room, it will. So there's just something about human contact. And they've also found that if the screen is just recorded, then it doesn't register. But if there's interaction, if somebody's going back and forth with the baby, then it does have an impact. So it really, as long as there's contingent back and forth, as long as there's interaction between the grown-up or the screen and the baby, then there can be real benefits.
Of course, I have to ask, and I'm not giving anything away, I hope, having Cookie Monster in the film is genius. Again, a nice sense of humor that's included in a tough subject. Did you have to get permission, rights, through Children's Television Workshop?
Oh yeah, Cookies people. No, it was. They are wonderful to work with, but for entirely understandable reasons, they are very protective of these beloved characters. So it is, and also it is. It's a complicated production thing to have them perform. You can't just show up. So we had to do kind of a couple iterations of what the script would be. And, there are certain things that they sort of, they want to make sure, it's not like you can say, scene 1, Cookie Monster puts out a lit cigarette, that's not going to happen. So there are certain, I think, things about the brand of Sesame Street that are very precious. I have to say the interaction with him, with Cookie Monster as a character, I had never understood how people, I always thought, God, that's fascinating. People just, they interact so naturally with him. And I thought, how can that be? And I at least got to sit in for the framing of the shot and interact with Cookie. And as soon as it started, it was like, hey, friend I haven't seen in a long time, but human being or creature I've known for 50 years. And it was astonishing how comfortable it is, how quickly. It's just, and David the puppeteer is a genius as a puppeteer, but also hysterically funny. So it made it really, really easy.
You got to tell us about Rachel. Tell us about working with her.
Rachel is the spectacular preschool teacher in the film who has become from this, her destiny has been fulfilled because she is such a phenomenal communicator to all ages that she is now really like a superstar advocate for the field. I have been to conferences with her where teachers and educators have come up to her and said, "Oh my God, you're Rachel, you're from that movie." And they burst into tears and hug her. So she is about the best teacher you will ever watch, as her co-teachers. And I think when you get through the film, you're so in love with her. And I don't want to spoil what happens with her, but it's such a gut punch to find out that the magic that a teacher can create can disappear so quickly simply because we don't support them. So I'll let people watch the movie to see what really happens. But fortunately, she is with the film still and working with us all the time, and is just a spectacular educator in every possible way.
Let me move on to some of, because documentaries are filled with statistics, and I wanted to quote a couple of them. One of the most alarming statistic is that 71% of the children in the U.S. from ages 17 to 24 would not qualify for the military. That's kind of alarming. You talk about that as being part of the toxic stress aspect. Can you tell us why that is?
Yeah, I mean, it's so. One of the amazing things about this issue is that there are so many voices from so many places that you wouldn't expect to support it. It's really an issue that can be incredibly bipartisan, and so you have voices from the left of the spectrum, the right of the spectrum, from the center, and from law enforcement and the military and religion and sports and all of that. And it's, I think, because there's a growing realization, really in the last 20 or 30 years, that it's not just the brain that is being shaped at the youngest age in ways that will affect you for a lifetime, but it's also the body. And sort of the intersection of the two in the way you interact with people and your social emotional development. So, they're starting to find that in crazy ways, if you have an overwhelming amount of challenge or stress as a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, whatever, it can reverberate in illnesses that you would never associate with something like that in decades later. And so, I think what they're finding is that things like crime, if you have higher quality early childhood education and care early on, it reduces the likelihood that you'll commit a crime. It reduces the likelihood that you'll be obese. It reduces the likelihood that you'll have certain mental health issues, and all sorts of. I mean, it's just on and on and on. And so you start to kind of play that out to military recruitment age. And you realize that so many of these problems could be avoided entirely if people really had the kind of village that we know is necessary for healthy early years. So I think the military is really a big, true believer in this now, both for their own troops, but also for the future of the country, because this is an issue that they know will affect them.
One of my members has some experience with that, and we'll get to her question in just a bit. Mm-hmm. One other statistic, though, and of course that involves money. In your film, you list that the U.S. ranks near the bottom, 35th, in funding early childhood education in countries around the world. I think we beat out Croatia and Latvia. No offense to any Latvians, but why is that? Why are we so behind? And is that one of the inherent messages of the movie is that we really have to put some funds toward this purpose?
I think it is. We didn't want to start with that message because one thing that we all know very well, is that the last thing that Americans want to hear is that we suck at something. And so, if you start with, America ranks 35th and supporting families with babies and young children, there's a portion of the audience that will immediately shut it down. And because they don't want to hear anymore. It's like, oh great, we're going to complain about America now. And so we deliberately kind of wait until hopefully you are pretty fully bought in to the argument before revealing how bad we are at supporting this in terms of money. There are all kinds of reasons for that are historical and just ideological and just, I think, the general ethos of the country that people tend to think you are a parent, you are the only one responsible for your child. And that there is not a role for any kind of support from society in that 0 to 5 age. That is a precious bubble. And I think maybe that was true when your whole family lived around you and not everybody in the house was working, but it's absurd to think that way today. And I think so if we are going to have a society where something like 75% of households, everybody in the household works during the day, you need somebody to take care of the baby. And so if you're gonna have that, then you need to pay that person a way that makes it so they can take care of the baby almost as well as you would. They're trained, they have hope, they're not taking 3 buses to get there, they're not on public assistance themselves, they can pay for their own kids. And so I think the message ultimately becomes that we are going to have to invest, and more than anything else, what the investment is an investment in the people who will be doing the care.
Okay, well, speaking of investing, some of the people that have invested in your film, the credits list, among many others, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Bezos Family Foundation. Should this be public? Should this be private funding for early childhood education?
We deliberately kind of punt the actual policy. We kind of set it up so that we hand it off to the policymakers to make those decisions because it is so local. It can be different from community to community, state to state. I think the one thing that is certain now, and that the pandemic in particular has made clear, is that there will have to be some amount of federal funding injected into the system, just so it survives, and then so hopefully we can, build something better when we come out of this. I think people have realized the absolute essential nature of this work in the last 3 months. And there are, something like 50% of childcare facilities in the country closed and may not reopen. So we may lose half of our childcare capacity. And then what do? We can't reopen the economy. So I think this has changed the nature of the debate considerably. Before I might have said, we can make it a patchwork, and it can be philanthropic, it can be private, it can be public, it can be state and local. There are all kinds of ways to make this work, and it's one of the nice things that allows it to be bipartisan. I think now you could still do that, but I think both parties are realizing in Washington that there has to be a substantial amount of funding to go into this to stabilize it and then hopefully carry it forward. Okay, excellent. Let me move on then to questions from our members. And I'd like to give a shout out to 2 of my colleagues, Dr. Catherine Lundquist and Dr. Edith Reese, who gave us some of their thoughts and a couple of the questions. So I'll begin with Catherine. Quote, I worked as a preschool kindergarten teacher 40 years ago at an Army base in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Even back then, the Army provided parenting classes, childhood care services, and help in any way that they could to the Army families. Life was less complicated, but still stressful, and no one could do it by themselves. Each platoon, company, and even battalion had volunteers to help each other basically survive. It takes a village to raise a child. How do we, here's the ultimate question, how do we get America to buy into this? Yeah, I mean, that's a fabulous question. It's so fascinating also, she says 40 years ago, because that, in the early 80s was when the military, I think some tiny percentage of their childcare was considered quality. In some of the, it was right around then that they realized how desperately they needed to improve the childcare in the military, especially for a volunteer force. So, it's now something like 97 or 98% of their facilities are high quality, which is an amazing turnaround. So she was there right at the very beginning of that. I think that the goal of the film, the goal of No Small Matter, was really to create a narrative tool for policymakers and advocates to say, this thing we've been telling you about for decades, watch this movie, it's one-stop shopping. You'll get it in a way that you haven't before, and then we can have a different conversation. So we wanted to just put it all into one, my wife calls it an investment brief. Intuitively everybody supports it. It's not like anybody wants babies to be miserable and families to be miserable. But I don't think people intuitively understand the sheer power of it, and also the common sense kind of biological evolutionary nature of like, oh my God, this is the whole reason society exists. Like, we make babies and we take care of them long enough so that they can make babies themselves.
Yeah.
So once you kind of start to put those pieces together, I don't think you can see it the same way again. And so, we always talk about early childhood as a grown-up issue. And I think that's the goal, is that as soon as people understand that it's not a luxury, supporting families and giving families the space to be the parents we need them to be, is not something that is sort of like, oh, that's an extra once we take care of everything else. It's kind of at the center.
Legislation for both federal and state departments of education need to be written, approved, enforced, which support the documentary, which you have so eloquently and specifically explained. But who will take this on? Will the teachers have the appropriate input when regulations and policies are formulated?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great mystery. Somebody said to us at one point, the reason that the issue that people haven't taken to the streets for this is because people get into early education because they're nice people. They're not, it's not like they're angry. So I think part of it needs to be that they need to be galvanized and inspired, and there needs to be a little bit of anger to this. I think the teachers will have to be a part of the process, and fortunately there are some great advocacy groups from all over the political spectrum that are, deeply, deeply engaged in all of this. And so it's entirely possible that we could end up with a system that just ties people's hands and makes it kind of too onerous to do the kind of joyful teaching that we see in the movie. But hopefully we can find some sort of middle ground where you have a boosted investment in all of this, but also the capacity for parents and for teachers to do the thing they need to do, which is just love and interact.
Right.
You don't want to overregulate love.
Okay, so now speaking of regulation, since the United States Constitution leaves education in the hands of the states, how should we enact these programs? Are you suggesting that each state should enact and underwrite mandatory pre-K registration, or that mandatory pre-K education be underwritten by the federal government?
Well, so a couple things with that. So first of all, one of the key themes that we hope to communicate in the film, in No Small Matter, is that it is not, the pre-K is a part of it, but it is not, and it's the first place people go when they think early childhood education, because that's a system we can all identify with. We understand what preschool is. But what we're really talking about is the entire ecosystem of human relationships around a baby. So that is 0 to 5. So that means childcare, that means home visiting, that means the world the parents occupy, you're talking about the environment and, safety and all of these things, the media ecosystem, all of that. So that is a much kind of bigger question about how we make sure that we support parents who have a baby or have a toddler. Pre-K is one way to do it. The one thing that I would sort of steer away from is the term mandatory, because one of the nice things about a 0 to 5 system is that it can be entirely voluntary. There doesn't have to be anything mandatory about it, and there probably shouldn't be, because you don't necessarily at that age want to start to impose mandates on how somebody is going to raise their 3-year-old or their 4-year-old. So hopefully what we can do is through the backstopping of funds from Washington, D.C., the states and communities can create their own systems that give people access to affordable possibilities.
This one's maybe a little technical. How does this view of childhood learning expand or differ with John Piaget's work on early childhood development and generic epistemology?
Wow.
Yeah.
We get that question all the time.
Yes, I'm tired of.
I can be honest in answering, I don't think I have any idea. I will say that if anything else, play is key. Children learn through play. Play is not an option. Play is not a luxury. Play is how kids learn. So as long as we make sure that we're not kind of forcing kids to sit at desks, 3-year-olds to sit at desks and take tests, as long as they can explore and be joyful, I think that's a good sign, and I have no idea if that has to do with what Piaget said or not.
Okay. From Mary Lindroth, she writes, it seems like Republicans and Democrats and independents are all in favor of this. So what is stopping early childhood education reforms from happening?
I think it actually, for a long time, I would have just said a sense of urgency. There are limited resources, and there's no natural electoral base. Babies don't vote. Parents are busy and just want you to tell them how to make sure their kid can go to sleep. So anybody who don't feel like they necessarily have a direct interest in the issue. So you don't get a groundswell of support. The pandemic, I think in the last 3 months, that has changed things. And I think now with parents all over the country stuck at home with their 2-year-olds going, I can't work, I can't do anything, I'm not teaching them anything. I would kill right now for a trained professional to take this child off my hands and help them grow. I think that, and also knowing that businesses, how are their employees going to come back to work if we don't have childcare? Politicians are now suddenly acutely aware of how fundamental this is to the basic flow of our economy and our society, and I think that may change the urgency.
One of the great memes that were posted during the pandemic is an SUV on the parked on the street, perhaps outside of a school, that has written on the side of it, "You lied to me. My children are not a joy to teach."
Exactly.
So we've all learned how difficult teaching can be. New York City, Doug Anderson writes, New York City has the Head Start program for preschoolers. Are you familiar with the program? And is there a model program you have seen that you can suggest?
Head Start, actually, the more and more research is showing that Head Start really works, and especially early Head Start, which is for, I think 0 to 3. I think we can absolutely learn from the model of Head Start. I think one of the nice things about this is that there are kind of guidelines for what makes a quality program. Some of them are sort of, basic math and facility things, like the ratios of children to teacher, things like that. But there are also things that are about less quantifiable stuff, how teachers are interacting with children, how they're interacting with families. And I think the organizations that kind of create those guidelines, if people look at those guidelines for what quality means, and there's plenty of flexibility within there. So as long as there's joy, and there's play, and there's a curriculum, and there's professional development, and there's teachers and adults who can kind of scaffold the learning as they go, what works in Boise, Idaho is different from what works in Marietta, Ohio, which is different from what works in Miami. That's the nice thing. And I think we need to both understand that there are things that make quality, and there are things that you don't want to restrict.
Great. Finally, Jess Takach writes that one of the great visuals in the film is the babies in the little tiny caps and gowns. And it's about learning, and it's about education. So what was the most impressive, what had the most impact on you in shooting this film? What did you learn from shooting this film?
I think I learned the sheer impact of this in the way it is part of the roots of everything in society. We call the movie Duh. That was the title that we were considering, was Duh, because once you learn this stuff, it becomes so obvious. It's not rocket science to kind of understand that, wow, if we really, really allow families to take care of children and the way they should, then society in every way will be better. So I think that was really the kind of the takeaway for me, was that it's so within our reach, and if we get it right, it's so powerful. That I'm a documentary filmmaker and kind of a journalist by background, or historian by background. So I'm just a skeptic by nature. I am contrarian, and I don't buy into things very easily. This thing, I still haven't found the thing that makes me say, no, this isn't hugely, hugely important. And that doesn't happen very much in my own life. So it's been great to suddenly have a cause and to really, really believe in this.
Thank you very, very much for joining us. No small matter. Greg Jacobs, very much appreciate your time and your efforts. It's a great cause. It's a wonderful film. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.